Hello, everyone. We are here for our Clean School Bus webinar today. Still letting folks roll in. So those of you have just been joining, thank you so much. We'll get started in just a minute. We are excited to talk through our program, and we'll, as I said, get started with the program in a moment here. If you can stay on mute through the presentation part, that would be really helpful. And then using the raise hand is going to be great to keep us a little bit organized. We are recording today and we'll be able to share the slides. So you'll have access to the resources that we're presenting today. I'll give it another couple minutes. We had a good amount of folks showing interest in the registration, so I want to make sure everyone's here before we fully get started. Maybe 2 more minutes, let's say. All right, our participant list is growing, so I'm excited. So I'm going to kick us off here. But thank you again to everyone for joining. We're going to talk through the Clean School Bus, EPA Clean School Bus program, but other things happening in Massachusetts, which we are excited to share with you around investments being made by the state and other utilities. So if that's what you expected to hear, you're in the right place. Otherwise, feel free to stick around. I think we have some interesting things to discuss today. We're hoping to provide some helpful information to everyone, and we have a great group to really dig in on what it takes to electrify a school bus fleet. We're covering all our bases, I think, with across the ecosystem with our good friends at the state of Massachusetts, both in Mass EC and DOER, and I'll let Orly and Zach introduce themselves in a second, as well as a good advocate ambassador in Anna. So we'll make sure they can speak a little bit, introduce themselves and speak a little bit about what their organizations are doing in a moment here. And then we'll dig in on both the EPA Clean School Bus program as the largest federal investment in electric school buses that we've seen to date, as well as the state programs that are currently up and running, and then highlighting some utility programs as well, because with the combination of all those investments, I think it's fair to say that there's a huge opportunity to start or continue to scale an electrification journey here in Massachusetts, which is really exciting. And we're hopeful that this information will continue to encourage you all to investigate that opportunity. So we'll go into introductions on the next slide. I'm Amy McGuire. I'm our Director of Market Development at Highland. If you're not familiar with Highland, we are a electric school bus service provider. And for us, that means we really cover the full gamut of planning a project, determining what the financing structure will look like, whether that's incorporating different types of incentive programs or not, and then working through the full project development and the management of that project throughout its life. So we typically enter 10 to 15-year contracts with our customers. Again, those customers are typically school districts or their third-party fleet operators. my team's role is really to focus on the policy landscape and program landscape that we're going to find as we try to support electrification for those customers. So really focusing in on how to make these programs work well, and then how people can participate in them. As I mentioned before, we have some great representatives here on the panel speaking with us today. We're going to present a bit of information for you all, have a few moments to sort of discuss some of the top items that we think about as a group, and then open it up for questions from the audience. So you'll have the opportunity to raise your hands and dive in to the conversation, but also please feel free to type in questions in the chat. And then we do have a record. Some of you shared questions as you registered for the event, so we'll try to get to those as well. Without further ado, let's go along our little circle faces here. Orly, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll go down the line.
Sure, thanks, Amy. My name is Orly Strobel. I'm a program coordinator at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, or MassDEC, on our clean transportation team. I'll just give a little bit of background or context for MassDEC. We are a state economic development agency, so essentially we're publicly funded and we run statewide programming, but we're situated a little bit differently than a traditional state agency. We have mostly pilot and demonstration projects, and the goal of those projects across many focus areas, including transportation, are to be able to take those learnings and then kind of create replicable projects across the state. So I'll get into that in my slide about our electric school bus program, but that's one of our main goals. I'm going to pass it to Zach.
Awesome. Thanks, Orly. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach Jenkins. I am the Massachusetts Clean Cities Program Director within the DOER. Clean Cities is a program that's typically through the Federal Department of Energy, but in the state of Mass, it's housed in the DOER here. We're committed to decarbonizing the transportation sector as much as possible, and doing that through promoting alternative fuel vehicles, specifically electric vehicles and electrification. I'll talk to you guys more about kind of what we're doing and how we're doing it in the slides to come. And then I'll pass it to Anna.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anna van der Spek, and I am the Electric Vehicle Program Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Green Energy Consumers is a local nonprofit working with consumers and also whole communities to speed the just transition to a zero carbon future. And I spend all my time thinking about vehicle electrification. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about some of the utility incentives and the big picture things, but I think we'll all have fun getting to the slides now.
Great. Again, so glad to have you all here together. I'm really hopeful that we'll get to share all of our different perspectives on what is, I think, from my perspective, sort of unmistakable increase in demand for electrification. And with this slide, I just want to show all the things that all the reasons that we encounter with our different customers in the different districts that we're speaking with around the country, but also, of course, in Massachusetts. And I think it just shows that there's a lot of different reasons to consider electrification. And in my opinion, they're all really important. The cleaning of our school bus fleet can hit on many, many different things and improve on many, many different things, whether it's looking at, reducing overall cost and budget impact of transportation, and driver satisfaction, but the maybe less obvious ones of academic success and improvements due to cleaner and quieter transportation to school every day, and potentially more reliable transportation to school every day. And I'm, as a true energy and environment nerd, I'm skipping over what to me are the maybe more obvious or prominent benefits when it comes to the climate change impacts and improvements and community health benefits, as well as environmental justice, especially as we see the majority of diesel fleet depots being in disadvantaged communities. So the importance of improving air quality in those areas, not only just for the depoting, but then providing transportation for underserved communities. And then the last two that also get me really excited, being emergency resilience as well as grid modernization overall. So thinking about these bus batteries as having an important role through an outage, but then also having an important role as a battery potentially on a day-to-day basis. So the vast range of benefits to me makes it pretty clear why so many people are talking about electrification and decarbonization, and in particular when it comes to school buses, as really touching some of our most disadvantaged or vulnerable community members, being children and students. So just wanted to frame up sort of why we're all here and doing this, and why I think we all find this to be really meaningful and important. So if we just jump over to the next slide. Yeah, beyond our, I think I can say, collective sort of desire to really engage on those important topics, there's a lot of momentum at the moment across all the different sectors that touch this, whether it be the policymakers in the federal and state space, which we're really going to dive into, but the fact that there are vehicles available and chargers available at a cost that is becoming more and more accessible to a larger swath of people, especially with incentive programs. And then there's business models that make it even more accessible and available to folks. And again, sort of draw all those together, making this the right time to really dive in and try to consider how different communities can start their electrification journey. So one of the biggest ones, yeah, next slide, please, Claire. Oh, actually, I forgot about this one. Anna, yeah, please talk a little bit about how we're doing in the Commonwealth.
Sure. So I know most of you who are on this call probably were preaching to the choir here about why EVs or why electric buses. And I know most of the questions are going to be about the logistics of how, but we wanted to spend one more minute on the why and just really drill down into how electric school buses fit into the larger climate plan in Massachusetts. So if some of you saw that the Healy administration released a climate report card last week, I think, sort of measuring up where we are in relation to our goals. And one of the big takeaways from that report card is that we're on track for 2025, but we have a lot to do for 2030, and particularly in the transportation sector, because transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts. Thanks to state law, we have to reduce economy-wide emissions 50% under 1990 levels by 2030. And the Clean Energy and Climate Plan, which is sort of the how-to guide of how we're going to do that, says that the transportation sector specifically has to reduce emissions 34%. And what's the bridge here, the connection to what we're talking about today, is that medium and heavy-duty vehicles, particularly those powered by diesel, are really the worst. They pollute disproportionately. And so the series of 4 pie charts at the bottom here highlights that. This is data from the Union of Concerned Scientists, and it shows that the share of on-road vehicles that are medium and heavy-duty vehicles powered by diesel in Massachusetts is 7%. But within the transportation sector, that 7% of vehicles is responsible for 46% of NOx emissions, 40% of particulate matter emissions, and 20% of greenhouse gas emissions. And those last 2 figures are particularly important. Particulate matter is responsible for so many health harms, from lungs to hearts to brains. It's what causes those academic issues that Amy referred to a couple slides ago. And greenhouse gas emissions are, of course, what we're focused on for climate change. So replacing a diesel school bus really has a disproportionate effect in terms of public health and also greenhouse gas emissions. So I'll get off my soapbox and we can go back to the how now.
No, thanks, Anna. I think it's really important for us to highlight, yeah, the data on what we're seeing and how far we have to go, highlighting the importance of really engaging in these programs. And as we can all see in the middle of the screen here, $5 billion hopefully also is driving some interest in the fact that there's truly a huge investment by the federal government through the bipartisan infrastructure law to make this happen. So the desire is there to really spur on the market to make electrification possible for as many communities as we can. The next slide, please. Where we are in the EPA Clean School Bus program, I think many on the call are familiar with this program. It started in 2022, as you probably saw on the last slide, and we're in round 3. So there are many more rounds to come, but that's not to say that it's endless. We are moving solidly into the second year of this big broad program, and this is, so to speak, the highest it's going to get as far as incentives, and also I think I would say that the sooner that you get started, the better, to just start making a difference and meeting our Commonwealth goals. I wasn't intending to go through all of the details, but of the program or all the information on the slide in depth, but rather wanted to have it up there for you all as a resource. This round is a rebate program, and we can dive into questions, absolutely. But this is a rebate round, which is an important distinction from round 2, which was a grant program opportunity. So there's a little lighter lift this time around for those following along. Many of the similar features as far as implementation requirements, as well, though. The other key things to point out, I think, are the funding amounts. So we're currently at a $345,000 incentive value for priority districts as defined by the EPA. We can get into that, as well as and a $200,000 for non-priority. I think while Highland and so far what we've been discussing is focused on electric school buses, there is opportunity for what EPA defines as clean school buses. So both CNG and propane are categorized that way. So there's an opportunity, different funding amounts. I don't have those listed, apologies. But those are nonetheless have some eligibility within the program. The distinction between priority and non-priority and to prior program rounds is that there is a call out for both types of school districts to be funded in this round, where at least in the first round of EPA, we saw, I think it was 96% of the funding went to priority districts. So it was very heavily weighted to priority districts. This round, there's an opportunity for non-priority to get funding for buses, granted at a lesser amount. I think I'll leave it there for now, just on that high level overview of the program, but very much interested in diving into the questions that you all might have around application requirements or the logistics. But this is open, it's available. January 31st might seem far away, but it is coming faster than we think, especially if you think about the days that we all are probably going to be in the office between now and then, which is less than gives me a little bit of anxiety. I'll put it that way. So this huge program, coupled with the state programs, is why we all, again, are all here today. And so I think we'll move over to the next slide and talk about another opportunity that is directly linked, I would say, Orly, but I'll let you take it away to the EPA Clean School Bus and part of what the state is doing to really complement the federal efforts.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. So as Amy mentioned, our program is really intended to complement all the federal funding coming through. I'll just do a little bit of table setting, why we arrived at this program, and kind of what we're hoping for school districts and others to get out of it. So In 2020, Mass EC ran a few pilot programs, 3 of which were school bus electrification pilots. Then Highland was one of the awardees or grantees under that program. And so the goal of that program was really intended to kind of see different methods for school bus electrification in the state. They're all relatively, smaller scale programs compared to a full fleet electrification program. And so we had, learnings from those pilots basically showing that school bus electrification projects are costly and they're also technically complex. So if you don't have those kinds of in-house expertise, it can just be, more of a task to take on. So when EPA came out with the Clean School Bus Program in 2022, Mass EC really saw it as an opportunity to develop a state program that, yes, could complement the EPA Clean School Bus Program, but also really ensure, in addition to funding, that school districts and others have the support that they really need in order to kind of fulfill the federal funding requirements. So the overarching goal of ACT School Bus, which is the name of the program, Accelerating Clean Transportation School Bus, is really to complement and support districts that receive federal funding, whether it's Clean School Bus funding or, Diesel Emission Reduction Act, other EPA funding. That said, any school district in Massachusetts, any public school district is eligible to apply to the ACT School Bus Program. We do just see it more as kind of an add-on program or an add-on funding and assistance program because simply, again, as I said, these projects are costly and complex. And so the amount that Mass is able to provide doesn't support a full fleet electrification project. So we, under this program, have 2 sub-program opportunities. In general, Mass EC has the same kind of prioritization criteria that Clean School Bus has. So we will prioritize school districts that are under the EPA Clean School Bus Priority District list, but we're also focused on environmental justice communities and gateway cities. So as I mentioned, this program is kind of an umbrella program with 2 sub-programs. So the first one I'll touch on is our ACT School Bus Advisory Services program. And this is not a formal grant opportunity, and it's also a little less focused on school districts that have secured funding. So this program is really more for school districts that are in the early stages of electrification planning, or maybe are just trying to decide what the best next steps are for them. And so this is kind of a cohort program. We're enrolling up to 25 school districts in this program. And again, it's not grant funding, but you'll have basically a no-cost customized fleet electrification plan that's prepared for your district by a consultant team working with Mass EC, led by DEIC, if any of you are familiar. So this provides some hands-on assistance and again, looks at kind of like a long-term fleet electrification plan. For this program, there is no formal application. You can just email us, express your interest. So Alex Pine, who's one of our main contacts from DEIC, is really heading the recruitment under this program. So you're welcome to reach out to the email here, and I'll put some of these links in the chat when I'm done speaking as well. But again, eligibility, any public school district in Massachusetts. And then for both advisory and this current round of deployment, which I'll get into, we're also welcoming third-party fleet operators can apply to these programs, so long as you've identified a Massachusetts school district, 1 or more, that you're planning to work with. So that's the advisory services program. And then the program that is the formal grant opportunity is the fleet deployment program. So this offers flexible funding and technical assistance to school districts, as I mentioned, that have identified another funding source. That's not a requirement for program eligibility, but it is just the reality of how our program can best support you. So right now, not to make things too confusing, but there are multiple rounds of Clean School Bus. So that we have a current round of fleet deployment programming that's open for applications. And that is really geared towards school districts that applied and hope to receive funding under the EPA grant round. So that closed in August. And we are trying to support school districts that receive that funding. So it's a little funny because I know the rebate is open right now, but this program is really focused on school districts that applied or expect to receive EPA Clean School Bus 2023 grant funding. So this application is open until January 11th. If you did apply to Clean School Bus, the application is intended to be pretty much in line with that application. So if you already completed those materials for Clean School Bus, it should be fairly simple to just send those to Mass EC for the ACT School Bus application. And the award potential under this program is $2.5 million per award. Again, that's intended to be flexible funding and it's stackable with EPA funding, so we can help support additional cost of buses, chargers, construction, depot upgrades and installations, and staff time. In addition to that funding, we're also partnering with a technical consultant team who can provide technical assistance and kind of walk you through the procurement if you're at that stage, or the construction installation, whatever you need at that point. So these are the two big program opportunities available. If you have any general questions, you can feel free to email the Clean Transportation inbox. I'll also put my email in the chat. You can feel free to reach out to me directly, but I do just want to highlight that that fleet deployment grant application is closing on January 11th.
Thanks so much, Orly. Sorry to, we're gonna jump to Zach in 1 second, but I got a message that I thought I would just help, maybe Orly and I can combine just clarifying the difference between the grant and the rebate round. I think you did it nicely, but there's two components, but admittedly, it is a very complicated federal program, and CEC is doing a great job sort of catering to their whims. So at the federal EPA, but just to be clear, round one, and so odd numbers at the moment are rebate rounds at EPA in the Clean School Bus program, and that means there's a relatively low lift application where they've created some selection criteria, but within that criteria, it's a lottery selection. The even number so far, 2, and then we're expecting 4 is anticipated to be the same and opening in April, are grant applications, which are much more under the official definition of federal grant programs, where there is for example, a longer narrative component, and you're really describing and going in depth into the project plan, rather than just requesting funding for just funding for buses and chargers. Thank you very much. Moving along. So it's a more in-depth process and really allows project partners and districts and project partners to sort of help justify why they should be selected over other applicants for whatever reason, whether what their compelling story is. So there's different, I would say there's different benefits to each type of program, and the goal is to really cater to the broadest audience possible with the different program designs and different funding opportunities. So again, just wanted to hop in and make that distinction around what we're working on.
Yes, it is confusing, and sorry, I know we're cutting into your time, Zach, but just quickly, I was going to mention, we did have an ACT school bus deployment round that was focused on the first rebate. So, we hope to be able to support clean school bus rounds in the future as well. Can't make any promises with that, but again, this one is really intended for the grant, but as Amy said, we are trying to move in line with EPA.
Yeah, and then I think Zach, please take us away, because the one thing that's sort of a constant is the More EV Trucks program, but there's also the important information around how Clean Cities is supporting that Zach was going to share with us today.
Awesome, thanks, Amy. So I'll start a little bit about what really Clean Cities is and the way that it works with a lot of these programs. So Clean Cities is a brand and fuel agnostic program within the DOER that helps consumers that are interested in electrifying their vehicles. We work with both public and private fleets, as well as individual consumers that are interested in electrifying. We help facilitate events related to alternative fuels. We participate in webinars like this, and our main source is really information sharing, getting the positives and negatives about each fuel type out, and really making sure that when these consumers come to the Clean Cities program, we're giving you as much information as possible to help you make an educated decision on what's best for you personally or for your fleet. Now, the More EV program is a program through the Department of Energy Resources, and it provides rebates for qualifying vehicles, classes 3 through 8, for $15,000 to $90,000 per vehicle. This does include a 10% rebate adder for vehicles that are registered or operate more than half of their time in environmental justice communities. These vehicles do need to have a sale price of $2 million or less and have a gross vehicle weight rating, or GVWR, which we'll see a lot, of over 10,000 pounds. Rebates are reserved for up to 12 months, and applications do need to be in prior to the purchase or lease of the vehicle. This can be combined with federal funding and tax credits for said vehicles as well. So this is a stackable program. And then the chart on the bottom you'll see is the incentive amount ranging from classes 3 through 8, that $15,000 to $90,000 range. And I will put my contact information in the chat because I realize it's not here on the slide, for if anyone who has questions for Clean Cities or wants some more information, I'm happy to provide anything that you may need. So thanks so much.
And then
So-
Anna, yeah, tell us a little bit about utilities. And I think we have, just so in case you want to chime in, I think we have some utility guests as well, but Anna, maybe give us a summary and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. So we know that switching a fleet of school buses from diesel to electric is not just a matter of switching out the buses, but it's a whole new way of fueling those buses. And lots of people at this point in the conversation go, oh my gosh, we have to install a charging station. Who's going to pay for that? What does that look like? At a very high level, you have an option. You can install level 2 charging stations, which are the same type that you might install for an electric vehicle, 240 volts that power the bus more slowly and can sort of refill the tank, so to speak, overnight. Or you can install what's called a DC fast charger, which provides direct current and fills up the battery a lot faster. What the costs of those look like depends a lot on which type we're talking about, how many we're talking about, what your depot looks like. But this slide will go over the incentives for either type. So the first thing, starting at the top, is that there is a federal tax credit for the installation of charging. As a side note, this is also available for individuals, but for school buses, it's up to 30%. Or up to $100,000 if you meet prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. But it is only available if the property where you're doing the installation is located in a census tract that meets one of 2 requirements. So the census tract either has to be non-urban, aka rural, or a low-income census tract. We've put together a way to check if you're eligible based on the best available information. The federal government hasn't actually released all the guidance on how to determine whether you're eligible, but we've got a little guide using some other resources to get a sense. And the key thing here, you might have heard tax credit and thought, wait, that's not relevant to me, is that the Inflation Reduction Act says 12, I believe, tax credits that you can use as a tax exempt entity via a provision called elective pay. So the Treasury and the IRS have just recently released some guidance on how to do that. But basically, if you are a tax exempt entity, you can still take advantage of this incentive from the federal government. So when we send out the slides, that title there is hyperlinked. So you can click on that and learn more. Moving from the federal tax credit to our utilities, most of Massachusetts is covered either by Eversource or National Grid for electricity. If you are in a community that has a municipal light plant, check with your municipal light plant to see if they've got any type of incentive program. But for the 2 big investor-owned utilities, there's bad news and there's good news. The bad news is if you are in Eversource territory, Eversource had a program, but it's already fully subscribed, even though it's less than a year old. So they had funding available for some public, medium, and heavy-duty fleets, but that's fully subscribed. So there's no direct funding for the charging infrastructure from Eversource, but Eversource does have fleet advisory services for public fleets that you can take advantage of. If you are lucky enough in this context to be a school district in National Grid territory, there is funding available. So installing charging stations has sort of 2 parts to it. One is the infrastructure, so the actual wires at the property that are bringing electricity to the charging spot. And then there's the charging hardware, the actual unit that you buy and install. And National Grid has incentives for both of those parts. So first, Grid covers up to 100% of both utility side, so on the utility side of the meter, and customer side, on the customer side of the meter, infrastructure upgrades for both level 2 and DC fast chargers for electric school buses. So if you need to lay new conduit, pull a new line out to where you park your electric school buses, that is covered through this National Grid program, which you may be familiar with the term Make Ready. That's what this is referring to. In addition, National Grid now also offers rebates for the actual charger hardware for public fleets, but the amount depends on the location of the fleet. So if you have a school bus fleet that is not in an environmental justice community, you can have a rebate that covers up to half of the level 2 charging units or the DC fast charging units. I should say now, if you're not familiar with the term environmental justice community, Massachusetts has a state definition of what an environmental justice community is, and there are 3 pieces to it. One is income, one is minority status, and one is language isolation. So a community can be an environmental justice community if it meets one or more of those categories of requirements. So if you don't meet any of them, you get a 50% rebate for the charging hardware. If you are in an environmental justice community that does not meet the income requirement, but does meet either the minority or the language isolation requirement, you get a 75% rebate for level 2 charging stations and an 100% rebate for DC fast charging stations. And then finally, if you're a public fleet in an environmental justice community that does meet the income requirement, the rebate is up to 100% for both level 2 and DC fast charging stations. Now, I know that a huge chunk of school districts in Massachusetts have third-party owner-operators for their school bus fleets, and the good news is that those entities qualify if they're owning or operating for public customers. So these incentives are still available to your community if you contract that out. And then finally, National Grid also offers a fleet advisory service for public fleets. And one sort of overarching message I would have for this is if you're a school district or your community is thinking about electrifying your school buses, get in touch with your utility as soon as possible. I'm sure Amy can tell us more about that. But the sooner you get that process started, the smoother everything will go. There's a question in the chat I see here about defining a public fleet. I can go and dig into the definitions of that, but if you are a public school district and you have school buses, whether they're your own or a third party, that is considered a public fleet.
And Hugh just helped us out. Thank you, Hugh, for quick response over there from National Grid. Great. So I wanted to sort of bring it all back together and summarize all of these pieces as we look at a comparison between what is typical in most of the country for school bus fleets today, as far as a diesel fleet, and then what it takes to electrify. And we talked a lot about the incentive programs, but I did want to highlight as well the solution that an electrification as a service provider, that's what Highland considers itself and how we define ourselves, as an option as well. So you'll see the before being the diesel fleet side, and then an electric fleet. The components are sort of laid out here as far as the bus and the interconnection to the electricity system, the construction work that it takes to deploy a project, as well as the software and the staff, and then ongoing maintenance. These are all the components to a project. And I spoke to this a little bit at the beginning, but what Highland offers is to really bundle all of those things to simplify the process. And then we can de-risk everything that way, but also potentially lower the cost. And that is the overall goal, by using our ability to take advantage of bulk purchasing and asset depreciation, as well as things like the tax credits that Anna referenced, even more so than a public entity. While those are available to public entities, a private entity has a slightly higher rate, for example. And then what, unfortunately, I should have fixed this graphic a little bit, because of course the incentive chunk underneath certainly would apply to anyone electrifying can pursue all of the incentive programs that we have collectively highlighted. What Highland does is bundle that into our offering, so pursue those on behalf of a school district or public entity or and their third-party fleet operator. So everything that we're describing kind of goes into the overall package, and we would support through application processes and then implementation and reporting and all of the things that sort of make it possible to receive public funds. So really wanted to highlight that there's a large opportunity to pursue incentives as well as multiple pathways to electrification and different opportunities to do that, and solutions to examine based on who you are and what might work best for your community. So yeah, next slide is great. Let's kind of dive into questions. We wanted to put up our contact information. I think Zach threw in his info, which is great, but here you can have it on the screen as well. Maybe we'll each put it in the chat. That'd probably be helpful so people can grab it maybe more easily. But I wanted to kick us off as a group sort of discussion, just maybe overarching. What do you all think? We described a lot of stuff going on in this space, but each of you, Anna, Orly, and Zach, kind of what do you think are the most useful or the most important resources that people should really pay attention to from your perspective? Or I'll leave it there.
I'm
Anna.
happy to jump in and say that I think the Mass CEC is a great starting point. I'll say this so that Orly doesn't have to, but that program I think is brilliantly set up to sort of welcome school districts in any stage of this process, from we just heard this is a good idea, how do we start, to we've already mapped out some depots and we need help in funding. So I think we're really lucky to be in a state where there is sort of one central trusted place where you can start, because definitely not every state has that. So maybe I'm cheating by responding that way, but I do think it's a great resource.
Thank you, Anna. I'm glad that you felt that way. Yeah, I think another great resource that often, especially for folks who are pretty in early stages of thinking through electrification, the World Resources Institute has great resources, including, I think some of the best ones are just general guides and pitch decks. So I can also drop some of those links in the chat or share if anyone's interested after. But I think depending on your stage, if you're really just looking for information, or maybe what you're trying to do is convince other people in the decision-making space that this is the right thing for your district, I would start with some of those. Yeah, and then I think depending if you're trying to find, again, a good project partner or type of model that you want to move forward with electric, it's always good to just kind of set up meetings with different folks, see what kind of services they can offer and how that fits with your needs.
I'd also like to parrot Anna saying the CEC does a really great job at this. Their fleet advisory services are amazing. And they're definitely great for someone who's starting out with something like that. I'd also recommend, if you like doing any kind of research yourself or want to dig into the numbers in a different kind of way, the Alternative Fuels Data Center website, the AFDC, or fueleconomy.org are both great sites to get more information on the types of electric vehicles out there, fuel corridors. And if people are interested, I'm happy to put both the links for those in the chat.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks all. I think it's really great to emphasize how many people are working on this and all the great resources out there. We do have different questions coming in, so maybe we'll hit on some of those. Let's see. let's see, we have one that's maybe a good specific question for the group to dig into is, what are the electric service hookup requirements for an EV school bus? So Anna, you talked a little bit about the different programs that are available. I'm happy to talk about it from an implementation standpoint if it's helpful, but why don't we start with you on just how you would think about it, and anyone else that how you would explain it to folks that are just getting started. What does it entail to get that going?
That last question was for me. My sound cut out for a good 10 seconds. Did you repeat that? I'm like clicking around, but I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Yeah, the question was around what does it take to get electric service hookup for an EV school bus, and how would you go about beginning that process? And I thought we could start with you, since you have a good background on the utility programs and sort of therefore know at least some of the key pieces of where one would start. And I'm happy to jump in on the implementation side. And again, Hugh jumped in with some links on the National Grid Fleet Program link too. So kind of wanted to go from there.
I'm happy to start, and we'll very quickly pass the baton to you because you've got the implementation experience. So the big question, obviously, when you're electrifying a school bus fleet is that you're moving from a fleet that would drive somewhere to refill to a fleet that needs to install infrastructure, new infrastructure to charge. And so the first question is, where are those vehicles parked? Is there power where those vehicles are parked? And if there isn't, does it make more sense to install power where the vehicles are or change where the vehicles are parked? And there's a whole series of complications here depending on who owns the parking lot, who owns the buses, and all of that. But I'll let Amy get into some of those details. But ultimately, the big decision is, do you want to charge at level 2 or with DC fast charging? Level 2 is the slower type of charging. It's much easier and less expensive to install, but it is slower. And so it depends on how you use your vehicles, which vehicles you're getting, and what their routes look like. So you can decide, do I go the cheaper route, or do I really need to pay that premium for DC fast charging, which is much faster? And then the sort of added layer on top of that, which Amy will definitely be able to speak more to than I, is do you want to use your electric school bus for some of the grid services that I see people are talking about in the chat as well? Do you want to be able to discharge electricity back to the grid and recover some revenue that way? And if so, that will influence what bus and what charger you get. But now is where I pass it to Amy to talk in more detail.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, happy to, Anna. But I think, yeah, that's a really helpful overview and all the different decisions that go into it, and important considerations. I'll start with the V2G or sending power back. And Paul mentioned this in the chat, that through Connected Solutions, the utilities in Massachusetts provide the opportunity for batteries, and in this case, school bus batteries count, to participate as storage assets on the distribution grid. So we, for example, use our school buses in Beverly, Massachusetts, to respond to Connected Solution dispatch requests from National Grid, and are compensated for that for Beverly on behalf of and with Beverly Public Schools. So that's just an opportunity that's available in Massachusetts, which is really exciting to make that happen. You do need to have what's called a bidirectional charger that can both charge and discharge, which is, yes, as Anna said, getting to the original question, part of your selection as to how you want to get your infrastructure up and running and what you want to choose to be available. Typically, what we do is very much aligned with what Anna described, sort of really dig into what are your needs, what do you want to use your fleet for, and then go from there. I think often what's advisable is thinking about a range of different things. So maybe a bidirectional charger if it makes sense to be able to access something like a V2G program. But for the for another percentage of the fleet, maybe looking at level 2s to sort of simply do the grunt work of making sure that buses can run when they're needed. But yeah, all of those are really important things to think through, and is part of a planning process that we've mentioned. There's a number of different resources that you can use to do that planning and get advisory service around, or work with a partner like Highland to come up with a sort of overall plan to see what would work best for you. All right, another good one is what can I do to help advocate for electric buses, and or get people in the community interested in these programs? Yeah, Orly or Zach, do you have thoughts on how to motivate or help others help us amplify this message?
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the top things on our mind too that we're trying to support and figure out, because it is a big question. Like, how do you get people involved who are, for various reasons a little bit hesitant? I think it kind of depends on why your community might be hesitant. If it's from a funding perspective, or we've heard a lot of districts say there's all this funding available, it's not really geared toward us. I think one thing really is to be educated on the different opportunities available, and especially the opportunities that are offering technical assistance. So obviously a little bit biased from the MassDC perspective, but there's, DOER and others are also offering great incentives. And so just being able to say, like, okay, these are your concerns, well, this is what's available to kind of mitigate those concerns, I think is really helpful. If it's really just from a standpoint of maybe misinformation or lack of education on electrification, I think one thing that we've really been plugging, as Amy really kind of walked through the Clean School Bus program, this is really like a once in a lifetime opportunity. There's so much funding available. All of the state incentives are available really in part to make sure that early adopters are set to have successful electrification projects. There will come a point where, as Anna said, we need to meet these goals, and there will be probably, mandates or other things saying that school districts need to electrify. And so I say kind of to that, like, you should take advantage of that while there's all these resources available, while the onus is not just on you. And then I'll again kind of say there are pitch decks and other things available, both through MassDC, WRI, I'm sure other sites as well, that provide kind of like a how to pitch school bus electrification to a school committee, or whoever your stakeholder group might be.
To chime in on that, I think part of the thing that really helps is because there's no kind of cookie cutter mold for the way to frame this conversation. Every fleet or every municipality's needs are different, and you need to tackle them at an individual level. And when you're looking at these things, framing the conversation as total cost of ownership, as opposed to the initial investment cost of these buses, is really what's going to help keep that in mind. Because what the data will show you is that school buses, specifically diesel school buses, over the course of their lifetime cost more due to the cost of fuel, increased maintenance on these vehicles, than their electric counterparts. And while the electric counterparts have an initial higher startup cost, the cost over the course of that bus's 10 to 20-year lifetime is significantly decreased, which is why when you're having these kinds of conversations, you need to frame it over the lifetime of the vehicle and not just the initial startup price, because you do get more out of it than just the cost of the vehicle. And with electrification, you're also seeing things like cleaner air, less noise pollution, and it's hard to quantify those benefits with numerical values. I would also say there is a lot of information overload. The great thing about being in Massachusetts is there are a number of programs and organizations that are doing great work in terms of electrification and putting out information, but it also becomes overwhelming from a consumer standpoint when you Google, school bus electrification, and then 75 links show up and they all seem like they really know what they're doing, and you kind of get frozen in that spot where you don't know where to go. So reaching out to organizations like Clean Cities, like the GECA, the CEC, or even the the specific government programs that run these institutions is a great way to get more information. All of our contact information is public, so reaching out and starting those conversations. I know myself personally, and I think I can speak for everyone here on the panel, where if you reached out and you had a question, if we weren't the person that could help you, we would direct you to the person that could. So just starting that conversation is really the first big step.
Awesome. Thank you all. We're getting some good questions here, and I know we're moving towards the end. The two that I would love to talk about are the cost. This is a big question. How much does it actually cost? And then how does it work to coordinate with a third party fleet operator? I'm happy to kick us off on the cost question and then see have others jump in. The unfortunate / fortunate question is it really depends. So we've highlighted a bunch of incentive programs, and a lot of them have big dollar figures. So you could probably guess that this whole proposition is quite expensive. For a standard school bus, like the one actually you see in the picture here, that's a Type C. That can depend, but kind of range from $320,000 to $400,000, depending on what kind of specifications you'd be looking at. And then you could add in charging for another, depending, maybe $10,000 to $20,000 to $60,000 for the different level chargers. And then install and interconnection could be a pretty dramatic range from a lower cost $10,000 to, depending if you need to do a massive upgrade on your site, $100,000. So there's a big swing of those sort of capital expenses, but that's why there's so much investment from the state and federal government, as well as the utilities, that really acknowledge that if we're going to make this transition, you need to sort of move things along a little bit. And then the other piece I'd highlight is there are sort of ongoing operational expenses. Yeah, and those, what we've seen through data and also our experience at Highland, those operational expenses are a lot less, whether it's fueling or maintenance or other things, are a lot less than the operations and maintenance of a diesel fleet. So yeah, that's at least my perspective on the high level ranges. Any other, did I get it close to what you have in mind, other speakers, or other thoughts around that question? Yeah, it's a lot. It's the conclusion.
Well, I guess the one thing I would add is that it's almost two questions. The one question is, in the absence of all incentives, how much would it cost? And then with incentives, how much will it cost? Because even for the infrastructure piece that you just mentioned, that range from $10,000 to $100,000, you could have anywhere from 0 to 100% of that covered by your utility program. So unfortunately, it's like a two-layered question, and you don't get a full picture until you've gone through both layers.
That is an excellent point. Yeah, on all the different aspects of that as well. Yeah. And then that, I think, carries into how much you are able to or can invest upfront in optimizing your operations through the life of the project as well. So are you managing your charging? Are you doing everything you can to reduce your overall fueling costs, electricity costs? All those things come into play, and fortunately or unfortunately, so complicate things. But I think it's interesting and fun project anyway. All right, with a few minutes left, something that's very common in Massachusetts are third-party fleet operators. Interestingly, that's about 70% of the market in Massachusetts, as opposed to the rest of the country, where the national average is reverse. It's about 70% district owned in the whole country. So as usual, Massachusetts is a special snowflake of a place. I think at least this group of panelists here, we all have different, have worked with different groups and communities that have third-party fleet operators. We have at Highland, and it's certainly, a range of interest, I would say, from those folks, as far as keeping to the traditional mode of operations that has been in existence. But I'd say all of these programs that we're discussing are available to fleets that either own and operate their own buses or work with a third-party fleet. So there's certainly an opportunity to drive the conversation by showing up to work with your third-party fleet with a lot of money for electrification. So that would be my approach. So it's possible, especially if you come with with money and from incentive programs and sort of a firm interest in electrifying. But yeah, Orly, have you all had other any other advice for folks that are working with third-party fleet operators and wanting to encourage electrification and maybe not seeing it driven from their side, at least from the outset?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky question. I would say, so some of the bigger fleet operators typically have electrification goals of their own. So it kind of depends on who you're working with. So oftentimes if you're interested in electrification, they kind of have those systems in place. If you're working with a smaller fleet operator, I think typically if they're not as well resourced, it can certainly be more difficult for them to be able to, you know, kind of like support or fund a project like this. So I think the best pathway forward, not to kind of like go back to the funding portion of this, but is to take the onus off the third party as much as possible, to be the one to say, we'll drive this forward, we will kind of provide the funding for this project. So that would kind of be my recommendation. And then, you know, I do think our advisory services are also a really great resource for districts that have these types of questions, because we try to work with the school district and their third party and kind of understand what that path forward or that partnership can look like for them. So that would be some of my advice on that.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Zach. We're just about out of time, but did you have any last thoughts? Anyone? Zach, you came off mute.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to chime in real quick to add on there. When, you know, you're discussing electrification with these fleets that may be a little leery or not want to step forward, the other thing you can pitch them is like doing this as a pilot program. You know, we're not saying electrify your whole fleet right now. You know, if you have a fleet of 15 buses, start with 1 or 2 and see how it goes. And that's the great thing about the way, you know, Highland and the CEC work, is they'll be able to help tailor these fleet assessments to what you're looking to do. And so it does not have to be a total electrification right away. I've seen a number of institutions that have started with 1 or 2 and done that over the course of a couple of years to see how it really affected them both economically and in terms of operations. And then when they realized it worked properly and there really wasn't a large effect on them, that's when they came back and we were like, okay, let's do, you know, 80% of our fleet now and really work towards getting electrification where it needs to be.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I like that as a nice positive way to end, sort of building up to a scaled deployment for sure is the goal and the vision, at least from my perspective. I think everyone would agree. But we're just about over time. Thank you everyone who stuck with us. And please do reach out to any one of us or all of us if you have questions. We'll be sure to share the slides and look forward to any future conversations with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you.